we've had some very good discussions today, and things are going along pretty well as regarding Ukraine, Russia.
The rules of war once had boundaries. Now, those boundaries have been obliterated. A strike on a civilian target in Ukraine has shocked the world and provoked a rapid, coordinated response unlike anything seen in months of fighting. According to Ukrainian officials, Russian drones struck a kindergarten during school hours, killing and injuring civilians, including children. Footage from the scene shows emergency workers pulling survivors from the rubble. Just hours after this horrific strike, reports emerged that the United States had lifted significant restrictions on Ukraine. British and French missiles were now free to strike deep within Russian territory, targeting refineries and military factories that Putin could no longer protect. But that wasn't all. The US also imposed severe sanctions on two of Russia's largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. The Russian stock market is crumbling and Putin is furious, but he has no one to blame but himself. By attacking children, he pushed the West to declare that diplomacy was over. The impact was immediate. Markets in Moscow fell sharply. The ruble weakened. Reports from major financial outlets described investors scrambling to assess the fallout. For the Kremlin, it was a double blow, military and economic. Russian drones struck a kindergarten at 10:30 a.m. Ukrainian time, right in the middle of the school day. The footage coming out is devastating. Rescue teams pulling children from rubble, smoke rising over a playground that was never meant to be a battlefield. Despite the clear evidence, Moscow's officials deny it all, calling the attack staged, even suggesting that the building was a NATO base. You can see firefighters carrying wounded kids, parents running toward the smoke, and first responders trying to save whoever's left. The sound of children crying for their mothers cuts through everything. Some Russian commentators have tried to spin the strike as a so-called act of revenge, an attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Earlier that morning, Ukrainian forces, using British-supplied Storm Shadow missiles, destroyed a Russian chemical plant in Bryansk. This plant is a key facility in Russia's military-industrial complex, producing explosives, rocket fuel, and other critical military materials. Russia started this war, and Ukraine had every right to destroy that plant. But instead of responding to a military action, Moscow chose to hit a school. Kremlin propaganda now insists those children were actors, claiming the kindergarten was part of a NATO operation. When Putin visited Alaska, the First Lady sent him a personal letter, urging him to protect Ukrainian children. Yet instead of protecting them, Russia has been kidnapping Ukrainian children and sending them to Russia, where they are being adopted by random families. Putin's actions crossed a line yesterday, and just hours after the attack, we received breaking news from the Wall Street Journal. The US isn't granting permission to strike inside Russia. Ukraine already had that permission. One of Russia's biggest oil refineries has reportedly gone offline after a devastating Ukrainian drone strike, a direct hit that sent flames rising high into the night sky. The attack crippled operations and struck at one of the Kremlin's key sources of wartime revenue. And as if that weren't enough, the blow was followed by an even greater international push to isolate Russia's energy industry from the world economy. In London, more than 20 allied nations, a group now referred to as the Coalition of the Willing, gathered to announce a united pledge to remove Russian oil and gas from the global market entirely. The message was clear. The world's democracies are closing in on Putin's last economic lifelines. "We're cutting off the money that fuels Russia's war machine," declared UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, who hosted the summit. His words came just days after the United States and the United Kingdom imposed sweeping sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, Moscow's two largest oil giants. Meanwhile, the European Union tightened the screws further by targeting Russia's liquefied natural gas exports, a key source of cash for the Kremlin. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who attended the London summit, reiterated his stance that sustained pressure, economic, military, and diplomatic, remains the only way to bring the war to an end. He once again pressed his allies to provide long-range missiles capable of striking refineries, weapons depots, and military infrastructure deep inside Russian territory. Those requests are still under discussion, but the tone of the summit left no doubt. The West's patience with Moscow has run out. On the financial front, European leaders agreed to support Ukraine's budget and recovery efforts for the next 2 years. However, they stopped short of approving the use of more than 140 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to fund what's being called a reparations loan. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen told reporters she hoped a decision could be reached by Christmas Eve. After months of diplomatic tension and political hesitation, Ukraine finally received the approval it had been waiting for: the right to use Western-supplied long-range missiles inside Russian territory. For Kyiv, this wasn't just another military update. It was a strategic turning point, a chance to finally take the fight to the very source of Russia's aggression. Almost immediately, Ukrainian military command activated a long-prepared operation plan. For months, intelligence agencies, reconnaissance drones, and satellite surveillance had been mapping out targets: fuel depots, command centers, air bases, and logistics hubs deep inside Russian territory. These weren't random strikes. Each location was carefully chosen to cripple Russia's ability to sustain the war. And when the moment came, Ukraine struck with precision and purpose. As night fell, the skies over the Russian border region of Bryansk turned into a scene of chaos. Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles, advanced radar-evading weapons provided by Britain and France, streaked across the sky. Traveling low over the terrain, they hugged the Earth's surface to avoid detection, their paths guided by GPS and onboard sensors to lock onto targets with pinpoint accuracy. But these missiles weren't acting alone. Ukraine's high command had crafted a multi-layered strike strategy, blending deception, timing, and saturation tactics, methods designed to overwhelm and confuse Russian air defenses. Before the main strike began, waves of Ukrainian drones filled the sky, hundreds of them. Some were armed, others were decoys, but their purpose was unified: to blind Russian radar, trigger premature missile launches, and exhaust interceptor stockpiles. As Russian forces scrambled to shoot them down, Ukraine's electronic warfare units jammed communication lines, creating chaos among Russian operators. Then, while radar screens flickered and command centers were overloaded, the real attack began. Storm shadows broke through the confusion, slipping past defensive layers that had been carefully mapped out through weeks of reconnaissance. Within minutes, explosions erupted at critical sites: fuel storage facilities, aircraft hangars, and ammunition depots. Secondary blasts followed as the chain reactions ripped through the installations. Russian media and local channels were flooded with footage of burning skies and distant explosions. The scale of destruction was undeniable. This wasn't symbolic. It was strategic warfare at its finest. For the first time, Russia's sense of territorial safety was shattered. The Kremlin had assumed its border regions were untouchable. Now, the war had crossed the line, literally. Behind the scenes, Ukrainian tacticians celebrated a textbook operation. They had combined modern NATO-style warfare with adaptive battlefield creativity honed over years of defending their homeland. This wasn't brute force. It was surgical precision, a chess game where every move was meant to weaken Russia's logistical arteries and drain its morale. And the message was clear. Ukraine could now reach beyond the front lines. Air bases once used to launch missile strikes on Ukrainian cities were now vulnerable. Command posts once directing operations against Kyiv were now within reach. The coalition's communiqué didn't end with sanctions or financing. Leaders also vowed to reinforce Ukraine's air defense systems, a critical need as Russian missiles and drones continue to target civilian neighborhoods and power grids almost daily. So, while Russia may try to evade sanctions, they are running a serious risk. Even if they manage to avoid detection, they are still facing higher costs and reduced margins. This is starting to hurt Russia's bottom line, and they will have to decide how much longer they can sustain these economic pressures. As the sanctions were being announced, President Trump also made it clear that he would not be meeting with Putin. The reason is simple: Russia hasn't changed its stance. According to reports, Russian officials are still demanding more territory, even though they've been unable to capture the land they've set their sights on for years. They claim that if the West gives them more land, they'll stop the attacks. But as President Eisenhower once said, a Russian promise isn't worth a damn. No one is willing to give up land on the basis of a promise from Russia that they won't invade again. It's been a dark day for Ukrainian children, but a pivotal one in the broader scope of the war. The events of the past few days have marked a significant turning point. And the retaliation from Ukraine and its allies has been swift and unrelenting. The world is watching, and Russia's actions are pushing the international community to take ever more decisive steps. If you appreciate these updates, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button.